sharpened on the concrete floor, embedded in a wooden handle. He held the leg and stabbed and scraped with the point of the nail, and the man groaned and tried to roll over. The handle of the shiv was slick in Rice's hand. Blood trickled down from an ugly ripped stab wound in his forearm. A metallic click behind his ear, the cellmate standing there with an open folding knife. He turned it and offered the black plastic handle. "All four," he said. Rice wondered idly at the status of a man who could carry a knife like this inside. The blade was strange-looking, like the curved, hooked beak of a cartoon bird. It had a serrated edge, and the tendons parted at its touch, the calf muscles reacting in spasm, leaping away to bunch and squirm. The second man didn't react to the cuts, and he didn't bleed as much as the first. "This one might be dead." "He's not dead." A guard came, and the cellmate spoke to him at the door, and he dragged the two men away, one at a time. Rice wiped the knife on his pants leg and handed it back. His cellmate took it without a word, turned and sat on his bunk, picked up his newspaper. He went to his own bunk, reached underneath for his iron pipe, cleaned it on the underside of his thin mattress. The gash in his forearm was still bleeding, so he tore off part of his sheet to make a compress. When the blood stopped seeping through, he tore 2 strips and bound the compress to his arm. He slid his pipe beneath his pillow, and he lay down, but he didn't sleep. Later, he would remember this night for the obvious reasons, plus another, which was the irony that his first lesson in Cerezo was one of mercy, of restraint. He lay in his bunk. Outside, the cool desert night scraped quietly against the concrete walls of the prison. He didn't sleep. 1. The bees in the wall attacked in suicide pacts of 2, 3, 5 at once. They flew at Rice's face, and he brushed them away with his gloves. He'd lost count of the stings. One landed on his lip and tried to crawl into his left nostril, and while he swatted at it, snorting like a deer, another stung him in the center of his forehead. He blinked hard and kept working. Almost finished now. He jammed the claw of his crowbar under the thin panels and snapped them away from the studs, working from floor to ceiling. When the nails were loosened, he reached back for the sledgehammer, smashed the whole section, clattering to the floor. He stepped away from the wall and rested the head of the sledge on his boot. A breeze blew in the open door of the cabin, stirring up dust. His eyes itched and his nose was running. Sweat ran down his cheeks. He'd started before dawn, and now all he had left was this 6-foot section of panels he'd saved for last because of the hive. Part of his job up here was eradicating invasive species, but these European honeybees had made it onto the protected list, probably because they'd been around for about 500 years and were famously dying off from some new ailment. That last sting above his eyebrows had begun to throb like an ice cream headache. He blew his nose in a dusty paper towel and watched the bees crawling on the panels. They moved like a drunken marching band, ranks and columns that circled, broke apart, coalesced into new shapes. A couple hundred nervous defenders vibrating with collective outrage, waiting to see what Rice would do next. Bees were purposeful creatures, and they had no time for this impertinent primate with his bent iron and oversized hammer. He exhaled a long breath toward the wall, wondering how he was going to get rid of the bees without killing them. At the least, he had to pull those last sections of paneling so he could see what he was dealing with. He tied a bandana over the lower part of his face and buttoned the sleeves and collar of his workshirt. As he approached, the humming in the wall increased in pitch, an unmistakable warning, but he set the crowbar in place and pulled. Nails, snug in thick oak studs for the better part of a century, screeched coming out. And then something broke, and a piece of paneling snapped away and fell on the floor. A yellowish mass seethed there as the hive mind paused to gather itself. Then all the bees attacked at once. He stopped running.